in this series, contemporary issues in Hashkafa, and I hope to continue the series next session as well. We'll try and continue the idea, and that will allow us to delve into other Hashkafa issues and go back on some issues which we didn't really totally follow in this and so on and so forth. But I feel that in a series, if you're dealing with contemporary issues in Hashkafa, you have to deal with women in Judaism. Right, so that's what is going to be the topic tonight for the world. Just an introduction to the issue of women in Judaism. And the sheet I handed out to you, which for the purposes of our kosher tube watchers, you can get this sheet on the Nishma website. And if you go to the library, to the subject index of the library, in women, and the subject in women, this is Women in Judaism, sheet 1. It's not really anything really specific in the sheet that I really want to point out, but the fact is that this was part of a whole project that I developed understanding women in Judaism. And the way I attempted to do this was through the mitzvot. I didn't try and deal with specific big issues, but I said, let's start right at the beginning with the first mitzvah. And I'm telling you, just for the first 2 mitzvahs in the Torah, which most people don't even think about, from Puravu and Mila, you basically understand the real issues of women in Judaism. Forget everything else. Those 2 issues, which most people don't even think about, right? Those are the place where you really see such a substantive area over there. If it was the next thing, actually, mitzvah number 3, which we dealt with, which was Kiddush HaChodesh. There's also Indians about Kiddush HaChodesh with women, about Chodesh and so forth with women. Also, there's an Indian with Kiddush HaChodesh with women, because women, it's a question whether women, there's a question of Birchas Levana and stuff, whether women can do Birchas Levana or not, and that's tied to whether women can do Chavdalah, Motzi Shabbos, a whole variety of issues with that. But the fact is that at Kiddush HaChodesh you deal with the issue of women not being Dayanim or Adam. So the first 4 mitzvahs of the Torah, 3 of them are distinguished between men and women, and it's very, and that opens up a whole idea. The 4th one, dealing with that being Adam, okay, that everyone thinks about practical, but the first one of Puravu and the second one of Mila, most people just take it for granted and don't understand the tremendous significance of that's involved with those mitzvahs. And I hope to touch on that a little bit tonight, but that was my project. And the real question, though, in starting off this issue, is what really is the underlying question of women in Judaism? And the truth is, it starts with the ideas that I presented up to now, in terms of the contemporary issues. What's the major contemporary issue? What's the major underlying theme to everything I've mentioned up to now in terms of contemporary issues in Torah? That theme is autonomy. What developed in the 1700s, which is the start of modern times and so forth, is the development of the self. And the self can make decisions. Right? So you talk in terms of, let's say, Kant, the categorical imperative, or the idea that the rational person knows what's right. It comes from the self. I want to. Okay? You talk about rights. Okay? Human rights, rights to freedom, rights to religion. It comes from myself saying, I want to do this. So what happened was up until that time, the world worked along the level of authority. Divine right of kings. Kings can tell you what to do. There was this perception of strong concept of telling you what to do. What happens with autonomy is I can tell myself what to do. So that starts developing this aspect of the self. So what occurs is that starts developing in a lot of ways, and then it develops into challenges of slavery. Why shouldn't every human being not have this right, and so forth and so forth. So it starts developing this concept of individual rights. And the truth is, we talked about this in terms of the Jewish world. That was the beginning of Reform Judaism and Zionism and so forth. But the fact is, as we pointed out, that it's an issue within Torah. How does Torah deal with autonomy? And we pointed out that there's a value of autonomy within Torah as well. Okay, but the fact is it really starts getting through women. The fact is, already in the 1700s, 1800s, there's already some philosophers talking about how we have to expand the rights of women. And you had the first suffragette movement, which was Don't define me as my husband's wife. Define me as a person. I should be allowed to vote for myself, right? So I can make my own decision. And this develops further and further along the line of a woman as a self developing further. So the thing that happens with the women's liberation movement is the women's liberation movement basically says you should be anything you want to be. It's no longer being told what you should be, but it should come from yourself. And that really was the battle in the 50s and 60s, leading in. Well, it started with the sexual revolution, which had a lot to do with my morality should come from myself. Don't tell me what's right. I want to figure what's right for myself. And if you're going to tell me something is right, you better have a good reason for it, or I'll reject it. So what happened with the sexual revolution was really challenging a theoretical morality. Everything had to be proven or argued. But what occurred with women's liberation was the beginning of the statement that I can be anything I want to be. Right? So if a woman wants to be a plumber, she should want to be a plumber. And what was contrary to that? Contrary to that was this perception that women should be something else. The first question is, what does that mean, women should be something else? Where did that come from? Okay, I'm not talking from a Torah perspective right now. I'm just talking from the world's perspective. Is there was an idea of women should be something else because this was a woman's personality. Women really want to just stay home and have kids. This is how a woman really is fulfilled. They may think they're going to be fulfilled by being a lawyer. They're not going to be fulfilled by being a lawyer. They're going to be fulfilled by being home with the kids. Right? So that's the idea that started to develop. Okay, I mean that was the idea in the 50s, 60s, and the idea that gender defined what do I really wanted to do. Right? So if you wanted to, is that if you had this gender, this is the kind of person you want to be. And it was reinforced by a certain societal perception. Women should do this, and so forth and so forth. What started happening is the development of powerful autonomy and this perception of self, which really is, don't tell me what to do. What I am comes from me. Now, you really see this in the extreme, for example, with the whole issue with transgender now, right? And you really think about this. I mean, here's a person and says, you know, a person is physically a woman or physically a man, and says, no, I'm really the opposite sex. Like you have a lot of people like this, you know. No, I feel like I'm a woman, so therefore I am a woman. But you got the parts of a man. No, I know I'm really a woman. Right? So now through the miracles of modern medicine, so we can make you a woman. Right? Which is what's happening with transgender. But if you really think about it, what they're really saying is the definition of who you are is not from external. It's not the body parts that you have. It's what you feel like inside, and you can define what you want to be. Right? And that's extreme definition of self. And that really is where we're moving towards in terms of the world. We don't want any impositions from outside. We want everything to come from within. I can tell you who I am. Okay? And if I want to be blank, 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 okay, if I want to be 6'8", right, 272 pounds, right, then, okay, that's what you can be. Doesn't work, but okay, fine. Well, maybe one day, well, we can. We'll put you into some kind of game where you have imagination and so on and so forth. And lo and behold, you can be this type of person. But that's really what's occurring is the definition of self, of who you are coming from yourself. And that really is what started. Now, obviously, I'm going to the extreme with the whole thing right now with transgender. But the fact is, that's really what the issue was with women, in terms of women's liberation. The world saying, if you're a woman, this is what you should be. This is what you should want. This is what you should desire. And the women saying, wait a second. Don't tell me what I like. Okay, I like this, and I want to be this. Okay, and that's really the challenge, and the movement of the world is to give a voice to this idea of who I am. Right, that's the movement that we have. The question now exists, as you understand the idea, is where does Torah fit into this? Okay, Torah becomes a should. Okay, so the fact is in a certain way, this is a tremendous issue within Torah, in the sense that if Torah is simply imposing, which is one perspective of Torah, just another authority system, then this authority system just overrides any personal autonomy. Right? In fact, we can call that personal autonomy, quote-unquote, Yetzer Hara. But in a certain way, and by the way, you can say that, in a certain way, we basically say, I don't really care what you want. This is what you got to do. Right? So that could be one way of looking at women, of saying, listen, the Torah is just an authority and it says women do this. Okay, now what are the challenges that exist if it was just that simple hashkafa? Okay, so we pointed out that the Torah obviously has some values of autonomy, but it really comes out in terms of some issues with women in Judaism. Okay, so let's look at this. So, what do you think are the starting issues, if you want to look at it just from an idea of imposition, that the Torah imposes, and in our world today we value autonomy, we value self-expression, we value something coming from yourself, and the Torah is coming as imposing. How do we relate to that? How can we relate to that?
Well, you have the point where a girl goes from her father's house to her husband's house.
Yeah.
And in that respect, she doesn't have that autonomy because she belongs to her father, or she sort of belongs to her husband. And
you're agreeing with that?
I'm saying that's the Torah way.
Okay. So how do you relate to the Torah way?
What do you mean?
Well, you want me to turn off the camera so you can do it?
Yeah, do that.
The fact is that it's very simple. I mean, the truth is that let me give you an example. You see, the truth is we have this issue. We brought this issue in terms of chukim and mishpatim, in terms of. Oh, I'll turn this off. Oh, it's my son. Good boy. Okay, it's my son from L.A. I gotta just tell him I'm in shir. Excuse me. Hi. I'm giving a shir. Call me back. Can you call me back in an hour? Okay, thanks. Bye-bye. Long distance. What do you want from me? You know. Okay. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is how do you relate? So we have the chukim mishpatim, where chukim you're actually supposed to feel that. I really want that big whopper or whatever it is, right? Or Big Mac, was it Whopper or big, okay? I really want that Whopper. God tells me not to, so I really feel imposed upon. But there's other things which mishpatim, which you're supposed to say is, this is what I really want to do. It's not supposed to say, gee, I really like to kill that guy, but what can I do? You know, God says not to. You're supposed to really not want to kill the guy, right? So the fact is that you can look at it. How would you look in terms of these aspects of women in Judaism? But the fact is that in the consciousness of women, if they're told to do something, is the consciousness supposed to be that attitude? Gee, I really would not like to do this. I have no interest in doing this. However, what can I do? God says I'm stuck doing this. Or is it basically, no, this is something I should want to do? Now that really is very fundamental. What do you try doing with women in Judaism? That's perhaps the first issue. Because what's occurring is in our world today is we start saying women are selves. They have their own personalities. They have their own individuality. And when you come across and say all women have this desire. All women want to have children. What? Is it true? I don't know. The fact is or actually I jumped ahead. All women should have children. Okay, it's an imposition. Well, maybe some do, maybe some don't, and the fact is it deals with the personality. But in terms of women, you're already dealing with it at a certain level, because your first of all issue is women supposed to feel this or not feel this way? Now,
who says we should? If the men would have to do something.
That's going to be a good question. I'm going to lead to that question. The fact is, the first way of answering that question is to assume. See, the problem is like this: is when you make statements that says all human beings should do this, that type of morality, okay, maybe they don't want to do it, but that kind of universal morality is easier to defend. When you start saying these people should do this and these people should do that, you have to start saying, okay, what's the distinction between these people? Why do you distinguish between these people? What's the reason for this distinguishing? And not only that, if that behavior is good, why shouldn't I be doing it? Okay, why is it only for that type of person? So those are the kind of questions you start dealing with in terms of Judaism, because you're having behavior that's defined as good behavior that's being distinguished. This person should do it, this person doesn't have to do it, or can't do it. So what's the right thing? Why are we making moral distinctions between people? So what happens is people try to say, well, it's more in line with the personalities. They're trying to say if you're dealing with distinctions, there's got to be reason for distinction. So distinction usually starts to work with, it's because it's in line with their personality. So the idea that, well, it's because men really like to do this and women really like to do that. So when you sit there in the 50s and said men have to go off to work and be professionals and women want to stay home and raise the family, there was this attitude, and not only that, women are better equipped to stay home with the kids, and men are better equipped to go out into the business world, and not only that, women want to stay home with the kids and men want to go out to work. And if you switch around their perceptions, it'll be terrible. You know what I mean? If you had a world where the men would stay home and try and take care of the toddlers, and the women went out to do business, they'd both be unhappy and it'd be crazy and so forth and so forth.
However, you did have that in history, like Rabbi Akiva's wife. Have many examples of great Torah scholars who sat and learned, and whose wives did go out and learn. Right.
So who took care of the kids?
Extended family, I guess.
Well, the fact is that I'm applying, and it's a very good point you're making, I'm applying what we assume based upon the 50s. The reality is the distinction between men and women wasn't so simple. The woman, a lot of times the woman was also the breadwinner and the one who took care of the kids, or the extended family took care of the kids and also were involved with breadwinner, because the idea was men were learning. But you still had the distinction. How would you like it if the woman sat home and learned, and the man went out and took care of everything else? Okay, so the fact is that, well, why only this type, why not that type? So therefore you start developing perceptions of, you have to come up with a reason, right? Because if the behavior is good, if learning Torah is good, because obviously it has to be, because half the population is learning Torah, and Torah is a good thing to learn Torah, so why do you make this distinction between this population should do it? In other words, if you say it's a value in a person sitting and learning, okay, so why does it have to be the man? Why not the woman? Okay, maybe there's an argument of Yisachar and Zvulun, right? One man's got one sits and learns, and one does the parnasa. You know, okay, fine, but it's based upon personality. But the fact is when you have the impositions that seem to happen from the halacha, you don't seem to have it. That's their personal choice. It seems to say this is this, so that becomes the question. Why is it that if it's a value, why is it distinguished based upon something with gender? So then there's the attempt to try and come up with reasons. So one of the reasons is, one of the arguments is, well, look at it physically. So there's a mitzvah in the Torah called Milah, right? It's a mitzvah Milah. It's a mitzvah only on men, right? Okay. Okay. The truth of the matter is that it's we bottom line paskin also, a woman can't be a moil either. They can't be, they're not in the mitzvah, not in the bris, and so forth and so forth. So it seems to be a simple answer. So if I ask you, why aren't women in the mitzvah of Milah? You basically said, well, what kind of question is that? But what's the real question if you're asking that question, why women can't be in the mitzvah, why women aren't in the mitzvah of Milah? What's the real question? Because it's a question that's very, very difficult. It's a challenge that's very difficult when you say women aren't in the mitzvah of Milah. And it bothers a lot of Meforshim. Why? What's the real problem? So what?
Why don't they have a mitzvah?
Why don't they have a mitzvah of? Well, seems to be pretty quick cut why they don't have a mitzvah of Milah, right? anatomy, right?
No, I'm saying the husband is supposed to do this, supposed to make sure if the husband's not available, whatever.
Oh, okay. So you're asking it's only a chiyuv on the father, not a chiyuv on the mother.
Right.
Okay, so that you could start to answer because only the men are involved in the mitzvah. And the truth is that's part of the questioning. Why is the chiyuv only on the men, not on the women? The truth of the matter is, I'm going to get to that in a second because we're going back to Puruvu in a second because there's a bigger problem with that. But the fact is I'm looking at there's even a question of the mitzvah. The prime mitzvah is on the baby. In other words, when I say on the baby, is the gavra has the chiyuv of milah. When we say that milah is a mitzvah say sheish bo kores, there's two mitzvahs to say that have kores, right? Excision. One is mitzvah korban pesach and one is mitzvah of milah. That's only on the gavra himself. If you are not mauled, then whether it's after you die you get kores but the point is what? No, it's at 13 becomes your chiyuv. At 13 becomes your chiyuv, and if you don't do your chiyuv, that's a really big issur, a really big avera. But the point is so when you ask the question, the mitzvah of milah is only on men. So why is it on women? So your answer is anatomy. But what's the real question? That question's not a good enough. That answer is not a good enough answer. Now this is an interesting perspective that you have in terms of dealing with all mitzvot. See, it's a little bit of a problem when we start working out mitzvahs. See, a lot of people they try and give reasons for mitzvot, and they start with, since the world is like this is the reason for it, right? In other words, you start off by saying, since it was important for society, blah 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 blah, therefore the concept of marriage was developed. Here are all these reasons that work, and so forth and so forth. There's a problem with understanding Torah with that perspective, because the given is problematic. Okay, most people say, given the way the world is like, you have to have these like law. Given the way people are, there's law in response to the way people. But there's a problem with saying, given the way the world is like, this is why the Torah has these laws. What's the problem with that perspective? The given is a problem. Or this is really the real reason behind that famous term of Histakol ba'arais of Borei Olam, that God looked into the Torah and created the world. What does that really mean? What it means is, okay, given that God felt that it would be important to have a concept of marriage, within certain circumstances, He created the world in this way. Okay? So you're working the other way. Given the fact that I want this conclusion, this is the way the world was created. Now, what's the problem with Milah then?
Time-bound? It's time-bound?
No. Actually, the question is, but it's not time-bound. I mean, it's not so simple to say it's not time-bound, but the fact is we're assuming it is not time-bound. But what's the problem with Milah? When you say the Milah, when you say, what? No, I'm going back to the issue. Why are women not mechuyev Milah? So your answer is anatomy. Why is that not really a good, if you really want to delve into the philosophy, what's the problem with that answer?
So what does it mean, Milah? You mean actual...
No. Think the question. What's the problem with the question? Think of what I just said. Given the facts, this is the response. But we said that approach in trying to understand Torah is problematic.
What did the women need? And He didn't create women with this need.
Force him ask the question. What is the reason for Milah? So if you look in the Chinuch says the reason for Milah is because Baruch Hu created the world imperfect, so man should perfect himself. That's a big idea. Avraham Avinu perfected himself. There's a big inyan to show that we perfect ourselves.
So women are already more perfect.
Oh, that's very nice. Women are more perfect. Do you understand that catch-22? But the whole point is to perfect yourself. So when you say you're born perfect, it really means it's not a good thing, because it means you can't perfect yourself. Okay. The fact is, and then there's the other perspective that but the point is, but you're getting to it. Why didn't God create women with an imperfection similar to the orla in men, so they would have a mitzvah of Milah? They're outside the bris. So why is it that women are, that Hakadosh Baruch Hu created women in such a way that they're outside the bris? Why don't women have something similar to Mila?
Why do they need it? They give life.
So?
They give birth.
So?
To children.
So?
But women,
Is that
Mila is a constant reminder of all what you can do. If you're your Sahara and fasting. And wait, you're men, this is a reminder. Where things will come out, this is the thing.
And women don't have any Yitzhara.
No, but it's not the same kind of Yitzhara. The truth is, a man and a woman, it is very different.
Okay, you know something, but you say, okay. What?
The same with a Cohen or a Levi.
Yeah.
It's the same question.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that's why when you look at reasons al pi Torah, it's not enough just to say that, well, this is the way people are. You have to ask the question, why did God create the way people are? In other words, the thing about belief in a Kadosh Baruch Hu is that there's no givens. He's the one who created the game. It's like saying, why do you play the game this way? Well, that's the rules of the game. Okay, so why were those the rules of the game? So what you're saying is, you're giving an answer. Well, God created women in such a way they didn't need a Mila, but men needed a Mila. So what is that distinction? But you're already giving reasons for that. Okay. Now the truth is that creates a whole variety of issues, because bris is so important, and the idea of perfecting oneself versus the issue of you're already born perfect and stuff like that. And you're giving ideas, and maybe it comes from childbirth and stuff like that. I mean, the truth is that it becomes an issue, but it opens up a whole development of greater depth into the issue. Now this leads into the issue of what we're saying in terms of women, in terms of child rearing, and the question of chiyuvim and stuff like that. Okay, you mentioned the fact that women don't, they don't need to. They want to have children. Therefore, they don't need a chiyuv to have children. That's the aspect of pruvu. But the fact is that, or some aspects that they're exempt from the mitzvah of pruvu. The truth of the matter is, when I developed the idea that the idea you were saying before of women having an obligation to raise children and so forth and so forth, the fact is the famous Mishnah in Kedushin that says women are exempt from time-oriented commandments, right? Mitzvah says man grum and women are potter, right? Okay? There's actually another general exclusion that's made in that Mishnah. It's a general exclusion that says any obligation of a parent to a child, women are exempted and men are obligated. Men are obligated, women are exempted from any obligation that's involved in parenting. So when you start getting, women are supposed to learn Torah, they have a chiyuv, so wait, very nice. The only thing is that if you really look at it, they're all exempt from every mitzvah that's involved in terms of parenting. Now the truth is the drabanan about chinuch, there's a machlokas about whether the women are mechuyev in chinuch and so forth and so forth. They have a chiyuv to help their father. Like a father has a certain commandment to feed his children up to a certain age and so forth and so forth, and women have an obligation to assist the father in sustaining the kids. Okay, which is very interesting, because why is it that a woman has an obligation to nurse her baby? Because since she has an obligation to assist her husband in his obligation to feed his children, she has an obligation to nurse the baby as the assistant to her husband. I'll tell you how far it goes. Okay? I'll tell you how far it goes.
Doesn't work.
Wait a second. What do you mean it doesn't work? Doesn't work. No, what do you mean it doesn't work? You're not doing it because... No, what do you mean it doesn't work? You're doing it because you want to do it anyways.
He has an obligation to feed his child.
Yeah.
That's really very nice, but by the mother feeding the child, right? But she's not doing it out of being his assistant.
She's doing it because of her own love for the child.
Exactly.
Right. So therefore, you're right. But so the fact is, what you're saying now is a woman, the raising of a child has to come from the woman's own desire to raise the child, because of the structure of law. So it's nature. That's why women have this perception of caring for the child. The truth is I want to take it one step further. I believe very strongly, this is why I think there's a distinction in the mitzvah Puruvu. I think there's two aspects of having children. If you tell people that they should have children as a sense of obligation to society, Puruvu comes from the concept of kishuha, of developing the world, expanding to the world, building up society, right? When a person says, we should have children we should have a lot of kids to make up for the 6 million, so forth and so forth, that is a communal perception of having children, right? To build up society. Okay, there's an obligation. I'm not going to say it's an obligation of the 6 million, but the obligation of kishuha is there's an obligation that have children, build up society, and conquer the world. Okay, that perception is a chiyuv on the father. There's another aspect of having children. Can't come from an obligation. It's the personal desire to have children. It comes from the idea for warmth. The idea of, not that this child is an obligation, but this child is something that I wished and I wanted, and therefore I want to take care of it. That aspect of wanting a kid comes from that cannot come from an obligation. You can't tell someone want to have a kid. It has to come from the desire to have that child. So my understanding is really what the Torah is saying is you can't have both people involved in the creation of the child with having both the same concept. You have to have one having a sense of obligation and the necessity of mankind in having development of the world, and you have to have one party come to it from the sense of I want. Now the truth is it overlaps a little bit and so forth and so forth, but that's my understanding why women are not mechuyev in Puruvu. And therefore my understanding in terms of parenting is you have one parent who has to feel I'm obligated to parent, that's my responsibility from the top down, and there's another one that has to come from themselves. It has to come from their own feeling, and that's an aspect of women. So my understanding of the distinction from men and women, that idea is actually planned by HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the sense that one party to this union has to come with this frame of reference, and one party has to come from another frame of reference. Just so happens he calls this one woman and that one man. Okay, but that's worked that way. The fact is, if a woman really doesn't want to have a kid, maybe she shouldn't get involved in this union. There's a whole question because she's not mechuyev. The truth is that I'll take it one step further. I'll give you an example in terms of raising a child and the way you're talking about it. So the question emerges like this: what happens if a woman divorces her husband before giving birth? While pregnant, she divorces her husband. Okay? So she has an obligation to assist her husband in his obligations, because that's one of the obligations of a wife. If she's divorced, she no longer has that obligation, right? So, what happens if the woman pregnant gives birth? What's her obligation to nurse the child? Obligation.
If you're saying according to that halacha, there's nothing.
So there's an issue like this. It's clear cut. There's no obligation of the woman to nurse the child. Now the question, I'll tell you how far it goes. You go look for a wet nurse. Therefore you need someone else to nurse the child. So you go find a wet nurse. The child doesn't want to suckle by any other woman. Okay? No, I should say one thing. If the woman already nurses the child, then she's obligated herself, because the child has already become accustomed. But what happens if you can't find any other wet nurse? So one reporter says, if there's no other woman, then the mother has to nurse the child. And someone says, why is this woman any different from any other woman? There's no obligation on her to nurse the child. That's okay. But obligation to save a life. But like any other woman who could nurse. Okay, so no, she's like any other woman, nurse the child. However, if she says I want to nurse the child until the age of 5, the child's by her. If she says I want to have the child by me, the child's by her. In other words, there's no obligation. There's no obligation on her, but her desire to have the child trumps everything.
And what about the father's obligation?
The father has no obligation. He can't nurse. Actually, there's a Gemara that says he can nurse, but
Only indirect. The father
has an obligation to no, he has an obligation to sustain the child. He can't nurse. So he's got to find some other way of doing it. That's why he's got to go and hire a wet nurse. There is a case in the Gemara. There is actually a case in the Gemara of some guy who actually. Now, what I hear from some things medically is there's actually cases of men who nurse. I don't know. I don't want to get involved in this, but the fact is that the point is the difference, the obligation and the desire. But if you look at it this way, you're already starting to deal with this with issues because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world this way. But once you bring in the idea that, well, the woman wants to, and you take away from Puravu, you say women want to have kids, then what you're already entering into the question of autonomy. So what happens if a woman don't want to have kids? What happens if a woman really wants to be a businessman? How do you deal with that? See, it's very interesting within the structure of most people, because most people talk about it being chiyuv. Women are supposed to stay home with the kids, and man is supposed to go out to work and stuff like that. The truth of the matter is there's no chiyuv on the woman to take care of the kids, except to help her husband. But the fact is that's so how do you work this out? So you bring in the fact that she wants it. Oh, what do you mean she wants it? So I'm telling her she must want it because it fits in nicely into the system. But maybe she doesn't want it.
So if she doesn't want it, then what are her options?
Not to get married.
I just understand, why does the want, theologically, if the man has a chiyuv, why does her want, which has no right? That's the whole point. In terms of the man has the chiyuv, but the Torah recognizes the desire of the woman to take care of the child, even though she's not mechuyev. That desire is considered to have tremendous value, and therefore, even though the man's mechuyev and says, "I want the kid to stay by me because I'm mechuyev to take care." I'm sorry, and the wife wants to walk away. But if she says, "I want it," Halacha says, "Okay, she gets the kid." Where's the source for that?
It's in. The truth is that I should have looked up. It's in Evan Ezra, I believe. I mean, it's in Shulchan Aruch, straightforward Shulchan Aruch. I have notes at home. The fact is, the truth is I don't remember the exact, but it's clearly in Shulchan Aruch. This whole issue. It's all Gemaras and stuff like that.
That's like a bottom line thing, because women in general would want to sustain that life.
So now you're defining. So now.
I know I'm doing it, but it's just.
So now you're dealing. Now you're dealing with the real issue. Now you're dealing with the real issue, because the real issue becomes now in our world today, is the fact that we have no understanding of gender. See, what our world did is our world came into the world. And this is a tremendous distinction. The whole way that our society developed was an imposition value. Everything was should. It had this whole world of should. And therefore the world came out and said we want rights. So everyone was told this is what you should be. And women are like this, and so forth and so forth. So you develop rights, and therefore you develop this idea of the self. So we live in a world where women's liberation started where don't tell me who I am, I want to be who I am. So if I want to be a plumber, great. So if I just wanted to, it got to a point in our world that it was human beings, and any distinction was individual. This person like this person like that, this person like this person, so it has nothing to do with gender. It's a personality thing. Individuals were all different. The point is that was the extreme of women's liberation, where you didn't have any distinction between men and women except for certain parts of the anatomy. But psychologically, you're saying now we're finding out that there are differences between men and women. Right? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Basically, saying there are differences. The question is the concern that if you have these differences, you're going to start saying, no, you can't do that because you're a woman. Or what does it mean to be a woman and to be different beyond the anatomy? And that really comes down to what the issue is in women in Judaism. We're struggling with this issue. You see, one of the things about the Torah is, and this is a major point, is usually the distinctions in the Torah. Like if you look in terms of our world, let's say in our world, women basically didn't have rights. Men could vote, women had the right to vote. Men could do this, right? Saudi Arabia, men can drive, women can't drive, right? All different. What really was the Torah definition? It was all chiyuvim. Men are mechuyev, women are mechuyev. But we have a value of being mechuyev. So what does it mean? Now there are certain cases, if you're not mechuyev, you lose rights. Okay? If you're not mechuyev in aidus, you can't be an aid. If you're not mechuyev, if you're not obligated to be a witness, you can't be a witness. But generally, the question is so women are walking out, like they want to be involved in the shul. I remember in my house, it was my sons who were upset. How come the girls don't have to go off to davening? How come they get to sleep in? Why do I have to go? It's not fair. They get to stay home, right? That's the way it was in my house, because the men were obligated and women weren't obligated. So the fact is that women were exempt. So the fact is, it's a very different construct. Same with Peru, but the fact is that with all these constructs, there was other things that sort of were imposed. Like, well, you're right, you're not believing in Peru, but you really want to have kids. And Ashkaf is Bas Yisrael supposed to have kids. So I'm telling you what you're like. What? Is it because of me, or is it because of me being one? And how do I relate to this categorization? And that's really the underlying issue here. I versus this category. Okay? Are you who you are because that's you, or because you're a woman? Or somehow, how do you as personality integrate with being a woman? The same questions with men. You have a lot of the same issues with men on other ways. Every man is supposed to love learning. This is the mitzvah of simcha of learning, this special idea of having hanan, learning, and so forth and so forth. And there's a lot of guys who don't like learning. So the point is but the fact is we try to project onto people to meet the model. Okay, so that's really an underlying issue as we develop the self in our world today. Okay, it really begins to deal with not only the imposition but the categorization of imposition, which is really what women in Judaism are all about. The fact that we are creating a system that has a duality, and the question of how that duality relates to me as an individual. And what does it say to me as an individual? And the uniqueness of the Torah perspective, because it's not so simple of obligations, it's also making statements of what you really like, or who you are.